Late morning. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Yamrot Teshome. Yamrot has a master's in gender studies from Addis Ababa University in Ethiopia and is a doctoral student, soon to be doctoral candidate, in gender studies in the School of Social Transformation. She has worked extensively as a consultant and a researcher on issues of women's reproductive health, gender, and girls' education, among others. Her current research is on women's reproductive health and the effect of Egyptian masculinities on women's health. The title of her talk today, as we see, is Challenging Social Norms, Ethiopian Women and the Medieval Era. Yes.
Thank you for the introduction. So I'll just use my notes also to present. So many assume that African women have not engaged intellectually, politically in the pre-modern eras. So especially in the medieval and Renaissance era. So as my presentation suggests here, I'll be talking about a few Ethiopian women who have had lasting imprints on their country's history and have had challenged social and political norms in those times. So I have been using Amharic and European texts to find out these histories and also known strong historical oral traditions of Ethiopia that go as far as 10th and 11th century before colonial era. So basically, the texts and the ways in which these women are represented either negatively or positively shows you that it's evident that they existed and that they had strong leadership skills, had political and diplomatic skills. They engaged in various historical works and challenged and resisted various dominant structures. So before talking about these women, let me tell you about where they came from and give you a little bit of a background historical chart to look at. So Ethiopia is found in the northeastern part of Africa, and it's called the Horn of Africa. So it's found there and has an area of 1,104,000 square kilometers. It's the 10th largest country in Africa, and it's the second most populous with over 90 million inhabitants now. Its history goes back as far as 4,000 years, 2,000 years before the common era, up until the time of the Aksumite Empire that we're going to discuss in detail now. The Aksumite Empire at the time was among the top four or the most four important world empires, like the Egyptian Empire, the Byzantine Empire, and also the Empire. So it's prehistoric stories also often told, about human ancestors inhabiting it 3.6 million years ago. Probably you've heard about Lucy, our ancient ancestor who was found in Ethiopia in the Afar region. So that's why it's called the cradle of humanity. As you can see, this is the map of Ethiopia. Eritrea, Sudan, and Somalia used to be part of Ethiopian kingdom, as we'll hear later on. I just want you to look at this area where the Aksumite kingdom existed, and also this Lalibela. Pay attention to it, because I'll be talking about it later on. And also the Red Sea port area, which was later on held by Muslim sultanates that pushed through Christian kingdoms that we're going to talk about. And also the state is predominantly an Adawi or Muslim state for the Muslim caliphates that existed. So giving you a time chart of the historical moments where these women that I'm going to talk about emerged. The first one is the Aksumite kingdom. Historical, oral traditions talk about it existing in 11th, 10th century up until the 1st century before Common Era, and then it's believed to have lasted from 100 to 914. And it's believed to have thrived between the 1st and 7th century. So that's something to take note of. The woman that we're going to talk about is Queen of Sheba in that era. And then it's also important to note that Christianity was introduced in this dynasty around 360, making Ethiopia one of the oldest Christian nations in the world, alongside Armenia. The name Ethiopia was also used first in this era around 4th century. And Islam was also introduced around 610 or 7th century, in this kingdom. So the second one is the transition period between the Aksumite kingdom and the Zagwe dynasty that you see here around 1137 and 1270. So the transition period is because Aksum kingdom is believed to have declined after the 7th century. So it's called the Dark Ages, and I'll explain in detail why it's called the Dark Ages. So Aksumite kingdom was growing weak because of Ottoman expansion from the north, from the port areas that I just showed you about, and then Muslim sultanates of the Hara that were pushing the Christian kingdom. So this lady named Queen Yodi had a huge role in how this weak transition period moved on to the Zagwe dynasty. So the third phase is the Zagwe dynasty, which replaced the Aksumite kingdom after the death of Yodi or Judith. So main religions during this time were Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. Of course, in the various kingdoms of the south, there were various religions. And then the last one, that has lasted up until modern day 1974, is the restoration of the Aksumite dynasty. They named it the Solomonic dynasty. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. So it lasted up until the last emperor, probably Haile Selassie I. So it lasted up until that, and they claimed their legacy from the previous dynasty, the Aksumite dynasty. So let's talk about the Aksumite kingdom. It's one of the oldest remarkable periods of ancient civilization. It thrived, as I mentioned, between 1 to 7th century. The kingdom extended as far as Yemen, modern Yemen, southern part of Saudi Arabia, Sudan, and Somalia. So it traded with countries or places like Arabia, Egypt, Persia, and India. So it had its own coins, gold and silver coins that it used for outside uses, and bronze coins for domestic purposes. The coins were written both in Greek and Giz. So Giz is the local Aksumite language. So oral traditions talk about a king named Aksumite who established, who said around Aksum, and who established this kingdom. And the kings that followed up until the document named Kibra Nagast, which is the glory of kings, and Kibra or Fitaha Nagast, which is the law of kings that was written around the 12th or 13th century, that mentions or writes in detail about this Aksumite kingdom. And also there was a 1st century BC document written by Egyptians that talks in detail about the existence of this kingdom and the trading, things that they did. And also it talks about the port of Abydos, which is one of the most active economic centers of the dynasty. So, these Kubra Nagast, these two documents that I mentioned, the 13th and 14th century documents, they refer to it as a Jewish kingdom. And they talk about a queen named Sheba, or Saba, who we also call Makda. Makda means a traveler or a wanderer. So, who has gone to King Solomon. And it traces, Ethiopia's history and the legacies of the monarchy to her son, Minilik, who is the son of King Solomon. So basically, there are myths, legends, and also written document evidences about the existence of this woman. She's believed to have been a very independent and free-spirited woman who is a great big businesswoman, tradeswoman. And then basically the story goes that a tradesman, an Ethiopian tradesman that has visited King Solomon, told her about the kingdom, so she was excited, she wanted to visit. So she went there, and then bottom line, she conceives a son named Menelik. About the seduction of Solomon and Queen of Sheba has been written about, and we can talk about it if we want to discuss it later on. But the bottom line, the importance of this legacy or this legend is that the ideology and legacy of the long line of kings that came, that followed these kings, claim descendants from King Solomon and his son Menelik. So her role in the country's history is very important. Them claiming this descendancy made it possible for such a monarchy to control a country that's so divided. It created stability, and it allowed them to sustain power for such a long time. So yeah, Queen of Sheba is believed to have existed between 11th and 10th century before common era. So as much as the Ethiopians believe that she is her queen, their queen, Saudi Arabia and some modern day Yemenis also believe that she is there. So it's interesting that I've seen many documents, especially the Ethiopian documents, say probably her kingdom extended as far as Yemen. So that's why they claim her to be their queen. And then there are others that mention it's probably because she passed through their country when she went to Jerusalem. So after that, after the 7th century, let me just briefly mention this one. When Christianity was introduced in this kingdom, the Aksumite kingdom, it was around the 4th century, and there's this stone that has a historical documentation of the king, Izana, who, formally adapted the religion in that time. So it was his mother, Sophia, who is believed to have, taken in 2 Greek men who came from, Greek to visit or to do trading, and then their mother died, so she took them in, and that's how she got converted, and that's how Christianity was introduced. But obviously, Izana takes the credit for it. Okay, this was what I was going to show you when I talked about Sheba. There are lots of paintings in Ethiopia, and especially a painting by our famous famous artist in Ethiopia, who painted, Sheba meeting Solomon. So after that, there was a decline of the Aksumite kingdom, as we mentioned, and Muslims pushing forward, but at the same time, internal conflicts created by some of the threats, which included the destruction caused by a woman named Yodit, or Yudit. And she's called Yodit Yudit. In Ethiopian, Yudit means terrible. It's interesting, the term Yudit is used to describe a woman who has done something shocking, could be positive or negative, but for her it ended up being, the negative connotation. And when Minilik, the son of Solomon, came to Ethiopia, there were Israelites that followed him back to Ethiopia, so they lived there. And when Christianity was introduced by Zana in the 4th century, they were forced to change their religions. They refused, and they fled southwards to a place called Colonial, and they're called Falashas. Falashas meaning immigrants. And so, they become a powerful community that pushed back against this Christian kingdom, Aksumite kingdom. So they had a king named Gideon, and Gideon had a daughter named Judith. She's a very beautiful central woman, but she was also known for using her beauty to achieve political goals. And a lot of texts talk about how she came to power, but all of them agree that one of the reasons that she wanted to be there is to challenge this Christian domination and to avenge the challenge that the Israelites faced, their fellow Israelites faced, and that how they were persecuted. She wanted to challenge that. So yeah, oftentimes she's known for her harsh leadership and her use of beauty and charm to get to those things. So how she got to power was she married one of the kings of the region from Dasta. His name is Zarazil. It's believed that she cheated him from, she didn't tell him that she was Falasha. Obviously, they would not marry Falashas in that time because they're not believers. So she cheated him, and then after that, she converted him to Judaism. There are traditions that state that she asked her husband to do, some of the hardest things, like getting a dress from, the church drapes or the church curtains, which are believed to be very sacred. So she did a whole lot of, things in terms of these oral traditions to challenge these dominant structures of Christianity. So she got into power, and with the decline of Aksum around the 17th century, she used this opportunity to organize her army and defeat the Aksumite people. So the Aksumites, with their nobilties and the kings, they fled southwards towards the central part of Ethiopia. And those that were left, usually there's a fortress built around, during that time to barricade or imprison royalties, because this is done to avoid rebellion among royalty. So they put all of the families of the royals and the nobilities up there to protect them and to protect the king from rebellion. So she made sure that she climbed all those difficult and impossible terrains to make sure that she ended the Aksumite kingdom for good. So she slayed 400 royal and nobility women and men up there. It's up until today, this is a church and a monastery now. Up until today, a woman is not allowed to go up there. And then you can see that the only way you can go is by climbing this rope. So she burnt a whole lot of historic churches and documents, historical documents. One of the many famous ones are Mary of Zion and Aksum, and other famous churches like Martola Mariam, develop Mariam and Gojam. She went everywhere and destroyed. If you go to Ethiopia, particularly in the areas of Gondar and different parts of the places, they will show you and they will tell you, especially the church clergies will tell you how she caused a distraction. Now, you know, her sexuality, her beauty, and her harsh leadership is what's often discussed. But one thing that we can conclude from what has been said is that she defied dominant feminine roles. Because imagine the physical strength to lead an army, to be a warrior, to have, you know, all those things, even though they're always talking about her in terms of her beauty and how she used that, you know, to challenge and use it for her political goals. And also, you know, her challenging huge structure like the church that's often tied to the states at that time was very something unimaginable in those days. So the following dynasty, right after her death, is by the Agro people. Agro people are also other tribes that have been subdued by this Christian kingdom. It's believed that they're the descendants of Yodis who have later on, you know, converted to Christianity. So, but you know, these were the pinnacle expressions of Christianity for Ethiopia, because the king, a famous king called Lalibela, the place that I showed you earlier on, they built 11 monolithic churches out of, you know, they chiseled it out of, you know, one stone, as you can see, and it took them over 24 years to do that. These are among the 8 wonders of the world. They're magnificent to see, even if you're not a religious person. Then this dynasty was overthrown by a king named Yukunuabdak, the remnants of Aksumite dynasty, and he claimed, you know, that he's the descendant of Solomon. So he defeated them, and him and his successors following that, they made sure that they built a huge and strong Christian empire going southwards, because they're always being pushed by the Muslim sultanates from the north east and by Ottoman Turks later on from Africa. So they moved southwards, you know, subdued kingdoms obviously, and converted them to Christianity. So it was in this time that we see 2 major things happening. There's this Christian kingdom, and then there's this Muslim sultanates trying to take, you know, power of the nation. So one of the descendants of Yukunuabdak was named Azay ibn Adingil. We call them Azays. The kings are called Azays. So Azay ibn Adingil was the one that faced the most challenge in terms of, you know, the fights that were going on throughout these years. Ever since, you know, the Zaghoi dynasty have been overthrown, they have been in constant battle with Muslim sultanates to take, you know, over the land. So it was during this time, where, you know, during the reign of Azay ibn Adingil, that we received another woman, a strong woman called Queen Elaine. Oftentimes can be translated to Helena. Her name is Elaine. So she existed between 1450, 1522. She was married to his grandfather, the elder mother. She was a Muslim first, and she converted to Christianity. You know, usually they do at times a peaceful negotiation between these Muslim sultanates, so intermarriage, royal families happened. So that's how she got married to a Christian king, and she converted into Christianity, and later on she, you know, advised kings, 3 kings, Iskandar, which is the son of her husband, and then Naud, which is her own son, and then the son of Naud, which is the Medicate, the one that I'm talking about. So she was a very strong, you know, presence in these kingdoms. And her advice was highly respected among the royal family and among the religious leaders, and we see why. She advised her husband, and when her husband died, and when his son was in power, he was quite young, and the nobilities around there didn't want her political engagement, so they wanted to push her out of these discussions, and she made sure to she organized a palace coup to have them executed, and she did. She managed to do that. Then after Skidder died, her son was there, so she was still constantly engaging in internal and external diplomacies. For example, she goes to these Muslim sultanates, different kingdoms, and she, holds peaceful negotiations, and she uses her Muslim background to negotiate with these people. So she was also highly educated. That's quite unusual because church education is allowed only for men in that time. She was well read and well versed in these documents, and she also helped write 2 books, the Holy Trinity and the Virgin Mary, in Giz. So on the other side, when she saw that the Ottoman Turks were expanding and they were using the local Muslim sultanates to, for their own colonial expansion, she said, we need to have also another ally, a strong Christian ally, so we need to send envoys to, other powers. So she decided to send a messenger to the Portuguese king. There's a letter that she has written that's been translated into Amharic and the Portuguese, and it's quite interesting how she frames herself in these things. She's a woman, in desperate need of support, right? But the way she framed it is as if, the diplomacy was quite interesting. She mentions that if the king pleases that we can, expand our own kingdoms, we're both, Christian nations, and we can intermarry among these, royal, groups. And she was very strategic. Anyways, Linda Dingle, her grandson, was in power, and unfortunately the Portuguese assistant that she had wished for never arrived at the time, and there was the Muslim sultanate that was really, really strong at that time, named Ahmed ibn Ibrahim al-Ghazi. He's named Ahmed Guraim, which means Ahmed left hand, and he almost controlled the entire Christian kingdoms. So they were basically losing. So she passed on, and her son and his wife, Queen Sablawenge, continued the legacy. And her son finally, at the Lenny's deathbed, he decides to send another envoy to the Portuguese. But it was late, and Ahmed Guraim had progressed in his expansion, and they were pushed on to the other fortress that I just showed you earlier, Debre Damu. So the king and his wife, lived a stressful life. Then they were refugees on that top hill, and the king died there. Debre Damu died there. So Sablawenge had 6 children from him, and there was a son, Galaudius, that took on power, and he kept on fighting Ahmed Guraim. So she was again an advisor of her own son, Galaudius, following the footsteps of the lady. She advised him. So when he went to fight Ahmed Guraim, she said, we're not going to make it though, with the army that we have, so we still have to send for assistance. So she sent a messenger to a Portuguese fleet that was approaching near the Red Sea. So it was a fleet led by Christopher de Gam, and when they heard the message, they came with 400 troops to where the queen was in a place called Ansada. So she joined them, organized her own army, and fought alongside the Portuguese. And throughout the time, she was the only person that Christopher da Gama consulted, and he wouldn't do any kind of military operation without her consultation. She was that strong, and she was that, skillful in military combat. So that was something really important. In the end, it was this assistance and this military support that defeated Ahmed and at the Battle of Santara. And interestingly, again, Galaudius takes the credit for it. But in fact, during that time, Galaudius was held, in a specific location and couldn't, escape because his army was just weakened, and Ahmed Grant would have won if the Portuguese didn't come, if she didn't send a message. So, she had a great role that needs to be credited. And in the end, you'll see that, the Portuguese, once they have helped defeat the Ottoman Turks and Ahmed Khan, they wanted to, of course, colonize and, extend their own interests. And one of them, João Bermudez, his name is João Bermudez, he was impolitely pressuring Galaudius to make, Roman Catholicism the religion of Ethiopia. She was very mad about that. She was very angered, and she made sure that he was expelled from Ethiopia. So since then, people have been trying to, especially Portuguese, have stayed there for over 50 years, trying to change, convert the Ethiopian Orthodox into Roman Catholic, Christians. On the opposite side of these two women was a lady named Bati Dilwahbara. She's the wife of Grind, Ahmed Grind. She's an important character to also mention because she married to avenge for her father. The Emir of Harar, Mahfuz, was her father. The main leader of the Sultanate was led by her father. And then her father was killed during one of the Christian Muslim wars. So there was this servant who is Ahmed Grind in her house, in her father's house, and he was a strong and skillful swordsman, a great fighter. So she made him promise that she would marry him if he avenged the death of her father and killed King Ibn. So she married him. So that's basically what he has been trying to do throughout the time that he fought to, challenge the Christian kingdoms. And throughout the military operations, despite the military chiefs telling her that it's unfit for women to, engage in war, she went alongside her husband. She fought battles. She made the, same moves that he did. She advised, and it was quite strict during that time. So that's a remarkable point to be made about her. She also negotiated, prisoner exchange for her two sons that were being held after their father's death. There were two sons that had been sold of the Christian Highlanders, like the son of Sablewanki that was sent to Yemen. So she made that kind of negotiation so that her sons would be back. Later on, she remarried the son of the sister-in-law of Ahmed Grind to again avenge and have the second son, which is Galaudius, that won the battle, to have him killed. And she made him promise that he would give her his head, in exchange for her hearing him. And he loved her a lot, so he made sure that her wish was fulfilled. And they defeated Galaudius at a battle, and his head was moved around the town of Harar. So you can see how strong these women were during that time.
Yamrot, you have 5 minutes.
Okay. So these are the last women I'll be discussing, and basically, like I told you, is Portuguese men have said and wanted to change the Christian Orthodox state into Roman Catholicism. So in the 17th century, after staying for 50 years, they sent another fleet. So they were writing that we can defeat this country easily, we could be masters, blah, blah, blah. There are documented, facts that are, were written by Belcher. So they succeeded in converting a king named Susinios. Susinios was raised by other ethnic groups, so he was more open to, conversion. So they succeeded in converting him, but the women around him, his mother, his wife, his niece, his daughters, refused to do that. Even when the men in court changed or converted their religion. And as they referred to it, they said, "We will never convert to this filthy faith of the foreigners." They said the Jesuit priests speaking in church, them making sculptures instead of drawing paintings. Sculptures are believed to be idols, right? So not painting, but sculpting was also something that they saw was quite different. Eating pork. These things were quite barbaric in their standards, so they didn't want to change to Roman Catholicism. So these women led anti-rebellions in towns, and they made sure that they didn't want to change. And they, in both the Portuguese texts and the Amharic texts, mentioned that the way they've been written about as sexually, morally loose. And I'll just read one quote, and I'll end with that. Belcher, in her account, talks about the Costa and Barrages, a Portuguese men who wrote about them, complained that these women openly dallied with men who were not their husbands, and yet were so powerful that their husbands could not reprimand them. The fact that royal women married outside of the royal family and exercised power over men, or they married above or below as they pleased, was something that the Portuguese could not comprehend, right? So they saw this as something that's blasphemous, and that something that they couldn't. Probably that's one of the reasons that they resisted. So they gave it as a justification for the resistance. But then again, the Ethiopian texts would tell you that these were female saints that protected their religion, and whether their social status or sexual license or religious freedom was not really something that was put into question. The women are Adramarion and Gilaut, and his niece. His niece is also another one that they write about. They say she is a lettered heretic that she gave them trouble. And the way they wrote about her is quite interesting. So she refused conversion and turned the entire village against them. And they approached her husband thinking that he would change her mind. Again, they didn't know the social context, so she didn't. So I'll end with this. There are other women from different ethnic groups that I would be, doing extensive research on, and I found in the 10th century, like Queen Apomenaya and of the Oromia ethnic group, and then there's the other one of Sidama, Queen Fura. Both interesting characters that we could discuss in another
ad hoc one?
Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you very much.